I'm Congresswoman Katie Porter, and I'm proud to lead this event alongside my friend Jerry Connolly and the folks at the National Federation of Federal Employees. Californians live under serious threat of wildfires every year. This is the new normal. Fire season is no longer a season, it is year-round. We need a 21st century wildland firefighter force to combat the 21st century threat. Our federal wildland firefighters put their lives on the line to keep our communities safe. But the lack of support that they're given has left agencies scrambling to recruit and retain workers, and it's left workers without the benefits and support that they need. These are long-running issues with the pay and benefits for wildland firefighters. And on top of that, firefighters must grapple with worsening climate disasters and high housing costs. It should not be a huge surprise that this labor force is understaffed when workers can make more as new employees at Costco than they can parachuting into forest fires. Congress has made some progress, but we have a long ways to go. The bipartisan infrastructure law boosted wildland firefighters' pay temporarily, but this funding will run out at the end of the year if we don't act. If we don't pass permanent pay solutions before this happens, federal wildland firefighters could see their pay slashed as they are battling some of the year's worst fires. The bipartisan infrastructure law also took an important step toward establishing parity among federal wildland firefighters, treating them the same across the different agencies that might employ them. Whether firefighters work for the Bureau of Land Management or the U.S. Forest Service, they should have the same job description and earn the same pay and benefits. Federal agencies are nearing the end of what has been a lengthy job classification process, and I look forward to verifying that we have actually achieved our goal. Congress must also address the mental health crisis our wildland firefighter workforce faces. Harsh working conditions, weeks away from family, and inadequate mental health benefits are pushing talented firefighters out. They often have no choice but to resign in order to escape the stresses of the job. Last year, the House passed bipartisan legislation that I helped lead with Representative Joe Neguse that strengthened pay and mental health leave for federal firefighters. This year, we've got to do it again and get our colleagues in the Senate to pass it too. Congress needs to support wildland firefighters by passing permanent pay solutions, improving housing, and providing better physical and mental health care for these essential workers. We are calling on Congress to get this done, and I look forward to working with my colleagues this year to finally get our wildland firefighters the help they deserve. Now I'm excited to introduce the National President of the National Federation of Federal, it's a big title, here we go. Randy Irwin, the National President of the National Federation of Federal Employees. Thank you so much, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you, Congresswoman. So, good morning and thank you all for being here. My name is Randy Irwin. I am the National President of the National Federation of Federal Employees and America's first federal employee union and proud representative of 10,000 federal wildland firefighters. I am honored to represent these heroic women and men, many of them behind me, who protect our nation's communities and public lands from wildfire. These are the workers responsible for protecting hundreds of millions of acres of public lands and provide an invaluable service to the American people. A lot of folks don't realize it, but these folks spend weeks or months away from their families when they're out on fire. They often work 18 hours per day or more, and they do that to protect us and to protect our communities. However, these wildland firefighters often go unnoticed and underappreciated. In many ways, they are America's forgotten first responders. That's not right, and it cannot continue. To all the wildland firefighters across the country, let me say thank you for what you do for this country every day. Your nation owes you a debt of gratitude. I also want you to know that we are here on Capitol Hill today fighting for you, fighting with you, and letting everyone in Congress and the administration know that there needs to be a new way forward for federal wildland firefighters. We need substantially better pay, more boots on the ground, portal to portal, improved mental health and medical services, affordable, livable housing, and more. We need these things, and we need them to get done this year in Congress. There is a crisis in federal wildland fire. These workers, to whom we owe so much, are struggling in ways that you cannot even imagine. When Congress passed the bipartisan infrastructure package, wildland firefighters got a necessary pay boost, okay? But that didn't solve all the problems, not by a long shot. That pay bump was a lifeline for these workers. The problem is, it was only for 2 years, and now it will go away without further congressional action. And let me just say, it will be a disaster for this country. It will be a disaster if we allow it to come to that. We simply will not have the necessary workforce to fight wildfire in this country and to get the job done. There will be an exodus from the federal service, and those who remain will be in even more dangerous situations than they are today. The bottom line is, communities are going to burn and people are going to die. Those are the stakes. We need Congress, both the House and the Senate, in bipartisan fashion to understand what the stakes are. So help us get this right. Let's make the necessary investment in federal wildland fire that this country so badly needs. I want to thank Congresswoman Porter and Connolly and Congressman Neguse and Congressman Kim. Thank you for your unflinching support of wildland firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, both on the Natural Resources Committee, but in all things supporting our wildland firefighters, Representative Joe Neguse from Colorado.
Thank you, Katie. First and foremost, let me just say a note of gratitude to my colleague, Representative Porter from California, who's been such a tireless leader on this particular issue, among many other issues. And I can remember when we first started working on this a couple of years ago, at every juncture, every step of the way, she's been a champion for our wildland firefighters, has been a leader here in Congress, and we're very grateful for her ability to help build the coalitions that are necessary to get this done. And of course, that also extends to Representative Connolly, who I know couldn't be here today, and of course, Representative Kim. Across the West, as you heard Representative Porter articulate, we no longer have wildfire seasons. We have wildfire years, and that's certainly the case in my state of Colorado. I represent the 2nd Congressional District. I co-chair the Bipartisan Wildfire Caucus, and I happen to represent a community that has been beset by wildfires over the course of the last 3 years. The largest, the 2nd largest, and the most destructive wildfires in the history of Colorado all happened in the 2nd Congressional District in the span of just 2.5 years. It gives you a sense of the scale of what is necessary for us to respond to these conflagrations. And I couldn't have said it any better than our colleague here, who described wildland firefighters as the forgotten first responders. That is such an apt description to me of the brave wildland firefighters who sacrifice each and every day to protect our communities, and whom, unfortunately, the federal government has failed to meet its obligations in terms of paying them a living wage, in terms of providing the holistic and comprehensive benefits that they are entitled to. I'll tell a brief story about one firefighter, one of these brave men and women. Tim Hart was a Forest Service smoke jumper. He was tragically killed a few years ago while battling a wildfire in New Mexico. His family and friends in Wyoming remember him as a kind, brave, and selfless man. In the years after his death, Tim's widow, Michelle Hart, turned her anguish into action by shining a light on the brutal working conditions our wildland firefighters endure. I am so grateful to her for her work in helping us ultimately introduce in the last Congress TIMS Act, a comprehensive bill, transformative legislation to better the lives of our federal wildland firefighters. As Representative Porter mentioned, several provisions of that bill passed the House, and several of them made it all the way to President Biden's desk. But our work is not done. Too much was left on the cutting room floor. We'll be reintroducing that legislation soon. But as Representative Porter mentioned, the clock is ticking. We are running out of time as we head towards this fiscal year, the end of this fiscal year. And the reality that the improvements that we were able to secure in the bipartisan infrastructure law, thanks to Representative Porter and Representative Kim and others who made the case, and the wildland firefighters behind us who continue to beat that drum, those provisions will expire. We have to ensure that does not happen. It is an outcome that none of us are willing to accept. So we're here today to call on our colleagues in the House, our colleagues in the Senate, to join us in our fight to ensure that federal wildland firefighters get the respect that they deserve. I was in Estes Park, Colorado last week, and I had a chance in my district to spend some time with one of the hotshot crews, the Alpine hotshot crews. Spent an hour having coffee with them up in Estes Park as they were going through their recertification process. And you visit with these young men and women. They care deeply about what they do. They're not doing it for the money. Lord knows that. They're doing it because they care about their communities. They care about this country. They care about serving and protecting others. They care about saving lives. The federal government ought to meet its obligations. So we will certainly do everything we can to ensure that that's the case, and we won't stop until we succeed. That I'll yield back now to Representative Porter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative Goose. It's now my pleasure to introduce Representative Andy Kim from New Jersey. And I think one of the things that Andy's participation in this fight really illustrates is it's not just those of us who live in western areas or those of us who live near national parks that care about and owe a debt of gratitude to our federal wildland firefighters. They are protecting public lands that are a treasure for every American wherever they live. So my pleasure to turn it over to my colleague, Representative Andy Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Representative Porter. Thanks everybody for giving me an opportunity to speak here. I'm Andy Kim from Jersey. And you're right, I wanted to come here because I wanted to show that this is a national crisis, that this is something that affects every single one of us. In the couple years that I've been here in Congress, I've been thinking about, with all these different issues that come forward, I think about what is the role of the US government? What is the role that we play here? What is it that the American people call upon us to do? And the most fundamental thing that I can think of is to keep them safe. That when there's a crisis, when there's a disaster, that they know that they're not alone. That they know that they can count on people responding and being there for them. I think about that in my own district, whether it's the challenges that we face in Jersey when it comes to Superstorm Sandy in the past, or most recently in my district we had fires in the Pinelands in New Jersey that was getting dangerously close to our communities and dangerously close to our joint base, McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. Who is going to pick up the call to respond and save these people? That's what we should be thinking about. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about when an American has a challenge, when they're facing wildland fires, who is going to be there with them? Who is going to respond? And that's the crisis that we face right now. We face a real crisis that there won't be the kind of response needed to save lives. And that's something that bothers me in New Jersey, bothers us across this country. And then certainly as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I think about it a lot in terms of the DOD side and the federal government side. Before I came into Congress, I was a career federal government employee. It's about fairness for our workers. They're not asking for the moon. They're asking to be treated with fairness, dignity, and decency to be able to do their work to save and serve this country. But they should do that with recognizing that service doesn't have to mean just sacrifice. There is a way that we can do this where we can be public servants, serving our community, but also looking out for our families and being able to do that too. That is the kind of dignity and decency that our federal workers and our wildland firefighters and others deserve. So I just wanted to be here to highlight that, and I really thank you for your leadership in so many ways. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to introduce Kevin O'Connor from the International Association of Firefighters. We're really proud to have IAFF as a partner in this fight.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. We're proud to be here standing with your NFFE brothers and sisters. This is about two fundamental issues. Number one is treating firefighters with fairness, equity, and dignity, and the second is life safety. You've heard the anecdotes. Our federal firefighters who are fighting wildfires work weeks at a time. Think about the aspect of spending 18 hours on the fire line, then going to a base camp that you can't leave for several weeks. You're still inhaling all of the polluted air, all of the smokes and toxins. And by the way, while you're at that base camp away from your family and friends, you're not getting paid. Think about the fundamental inequity of that. Federal firefighters are probably the worst treated group of employees anywhere. Over a half century ago, the Fair Labor Standards Act set a 40-hour work week for private sector workers. Certainly the federal firefighters battling wildfires are working far more than that. Their counterparts on the structural side, Congressman Kim mentioned the military bases, the federal firefighters there work a 72-hour work week. Think about that. Every single day of their life, whether they're coming on or off duty, they are in a firehouse if they're not on injury leave, sick leave, or personal vacation time. There needs to be pay equity. It's absolutely unfair that folks are being treated this way, and it's coming from this building. It needs to be repaired. I mentioned life safety. Fundamentally, that's what government's responsibility is. Our people are on the front lines risking their lives. People in my generation remember wildfires as you saw them in the forest, Smokey Bear, and all that thing. Great, they were epic, they were catastrophic, but they were part of the natural rejuvenation of forests. They needed to happen. Now we're not just talking wildfire, we're talking interface fires. These are the fires that rip through communities in Colorado, destroying hundreds of homes in legitimately a couple of hours. Now think about the difference. In a wildfire, what's burning? Foliage, shrubbery, and trees. Kind of a clean type of smoke. When you talk about some of these interface fires, roofing shingles, plastic piping, PVC, treated woods, all toxins. The fires burn so hot that even underground infrastructure, plastic water piping, melts and pollutes our water supply, leaching benzene into it. This is about two things. We already have enough challenges with wildfires. We don't need to complicate it by not having enough firefighters, not having well-trained firefighters, and not treating them fairly and giving them the compensation and justice they deserve. We're proud to be here with our brothers. Let's move this forward.
Introduce a Wildland firefighter, a member of NFFE, Justin Brown. We're going to hear directly from him about his experience.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Justin Brown. I'm from Alaska National Forest in Northern California. I'm honored to be here representing all my brothers and sisters that are in the wildland fire community and everyone here at NFFE. Like everyone's been saying, we've been the forgotten first responders. We've been silent professionals for years, getting paid in sunsets and sunrises, and at this point, I mean, you have people living out of their vehicles just to get by, because we can't get by on our wages. You have constantly people coming down with cancer, line of duty deaths, multitude of injuries. I always remember from my first day coming into fire, captain telling me that you will end up with some kind of a debilitating injury in this profession. And at the time, it was kind of a weird thing to think about. But basically, we're all getting into this profession because we love to serve. We love what we're doing. We strive to be the best professional wildland firefighters that we can, and we just feel like we deserve to be treated as such. We deserve to be compensated. We shouldn't have to work side by side with all these other departments and see them get better pay, better benefits for the same job while we sit there and just struggle. So yeah, and that's pretty much all I have to say. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing your experience. It's now my pleasure to welcome Bobby Scopa, who is the Executive Secretary of an incredibly important organization who's also been a very important partner in this fight, especially lifting up the stories of firefighters themselves. She is the Executive Secretary of the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters Association. Thank you, Bobby, for being here.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say thanks first of all, but second of all, I'd like to tell you I started fighting fires 50 years ago. 50 years ago was my first season fighting wildfires. By the time I retired a few years ago, the job didn't look anything like it looks today. Like these young men behind me, the job has changed dramatically. The firefighters are called upon now to do things more than just fight wildland fires. Personally, I've been to hurricanes, I've been to landslides, I spent 30 days at New York City after the 9/11 attacks. But we treat our federal wildland firefighters like unskilled labor. They're not. They're not. They're so much more than that. I want to read you a letter I got last night from one of the wildland firefighters' wives. Now, this young woman had been a wildland firefighter, but she resigned her position so she could stay home and keep a home while her husband continued his career as a wildland firefighter. Here's what she said. It was one of the worst jobs you could imagine. It's often grueling physical labor under extreme circumstances. The hazards are sometimes immediate, whether from the actual fire, from the falling trees, or from the rolling debris. But it's also years of smoke inhalation, arthritic joints, subjecting your body and mind to the intense amounts of stress. It's long days and nights away from home and your family. It's a culture of being overworked and underpaid. It is a calling accepted by highly skilled, dignified people willing to respond to an increasing threat to our families, homes, and communities. Those are strong words by a former wildland firefighter and the wife of a current firefighter. Let me tell you, our current firefighters, those folks standing behind me, are better trained and more professional than we were when I started 50 years ago. The job has changed, our firefighting community and expectations and responsibilities have changed, but the way we compensate them has not. This funding package is the anchor point for future reforms that are still needed, such as a better work-life balance. I really hope that we can be successful, and I want to thank everybody for the efforts they're making in this behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. Our next speaker is Max Alonso, who's a former wildland fighter with the U.S. Forest Service. Max?
Yes, my name is Max Alonso. As a former U.S. Forest Service employee, I can tell you, I know firsthand how hard this job has gotten. This career has changed over decades. It has gotten more difficult. Conditions have gotten worse. Fires have gotten longer. The season gets longer. Our men and women are breathing in carcinogens for 8 months at a time, sometimes longer. Cancer it's so common in wildfire now. The housing issue. We could go on and on and on about the issues. A lot of this comes down to a lot of pay. We can't retain people anymore. We can't retain our professional wildland firefighters because we're not paying them the same as other people. So what's happening? They're getting poached by other agencies. They're going to just jobs outside of wildfire. They've had enough, and this is not just about getting people what they deserve. It is about getting people what they deserve, but this is a national security threat at this point. We're going to be losing our national resources. We're going to be losing communities because we can't keep our skilled wildland firefighters employed. They're ready to walk out the door. We got a little bit out of the bipartisan infrastructure package. The retention bonus has been able to keep some people on, but we're still losing people even with that bonus. When this goes away, I guarantee we're going to see a very, very large percentage of our workforce walk out the door. And I know I'm echoing what a lot of our representatives and my colleagues have said, but we're quickly approaching this. We need to get this done. This is not just about pay and benefits. This is about our national security. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker is William Bowser, who's a firefighter designee and a member of the American Federation of Government Employees.
I'd like to thank my brothers and sisters back here for fighting us. And I am a wildland firefighter. I'm also a Department of Defense firefighter. I'm a member of IFF. And I will tell you that one of the biggest and most important things that I see in the DoD and across the board with our sister agencies and our brother agencies, they forget about us. They move past, they go on about their lives, and they forget that these men and women that are fighting behind the scenes to not only fight for your lives, but they're also fighting for their families. Because without the proper pay, without the proper balance, you're not going to have anything to come home to. At the end of the day, when you wrap up your gear, you get off your rig and you get in your car, and you go home, and you walk through that door, if there's nothing waiting for you, then you just go back to work. And a lot of my brothers and sisters do that day in and day out. They sacrifice their lives, their personal lives, to make sure your personal life is safe. So a little thing like pay, which a lot of people look at it as a very small thing, it's a very big thing. Currently right now, a little over 60% of the workforce throughout, not just the DoD, not just the Army, not just the the Federal Wildland Service, across the board, they are leaving their agencies to go into local sector fire departments because they're getting paid double to work less hours. Their benefit packages are better. Their time at home with their families is better. Long-term health care is better. They don't have to worry about the structure that we have to deal with the feds. It's unfathomable to me to understand why it is that a federal entity like the Department of Defense and the National Wildland Service has a problem with competing with local sector. That is incredible, since the local sector gets their budget from us. So why is it that we cannot provide the basic things like healthcare, mental health, just additional structure for these guys to maintain their positions so they can do one simple thing: save your life.